All right, Aaron.
Okay, you want me to take it away?
Yeah. Yeah, go
Okay,
ahead. Thank you.
sure. um, okay, good evening, everybody. So tonight we have mainly, kind of just an organizing meeting. We had, from our prior version of the work plan, we had checking in about the high school planning update tonight was kind of the nominally, part of the content for tonight, and then potentially looking at, small amendment to to an aspect of the graduation policy that wasn't urgent, but felt like it made sense. Of course, we did the brief update recently for the full board around the high school piece, so it didn't feel like, we were at a place of any additional content to kind of share on that front. And then I think, so that's just one piece that kind of shifted the agenda. And then I think more so in kind of conversation, and working with Ryan and kind of the cabinet more broadly, certainly in some of the conversations with the chair and vice chair about how to kind of organize both the board and committee calendars, as well as down even to our cabinet level and so forth, to just kind of be aligned around the objectives we've named that we talked about, that kind of came out of the organizational diagnostic for this year, just while we're continuing to build the 5-year strategic plan. It has led us to kind of revision a little bit of our work plan and calendar in a way that I feel I feel good about. I'll step us through it a little bit. So the goal tonight is to kind of get your input on any kind of modifications to kind of that work plan. So given that we'd already done some of the content for tonight with the full board in our recent meeting, and the other kind of policy piece was not urgent by any means. It felt like it made sense to kind of use this time to, again, kind of get reorganized in a more coherent way. So I think hopefully have a plan to that end to kind of align. And so what we'll see, and so I'll kind of talk through a little bit of my process and where that's kind of landed, and then, open it up for discussion based on, kind of board member interest and alignment and feedback. But one of the things is we've set this cadence and calendar around many of the things that we had kind of outlined as potential topics to, discuss, report out on progress and so forth, like the ESOL resolution, high school implementation. I forget what else in terms of kind of content that we'd had in our initial work plan are things that are now scheduled in for full board updates. And where we've been reviewing this, we'll kind of, we're prepared to share it with Sarah and Mickey and our check-in tomorrow to kind of sign off. So some of those things don't feel as relevant to do here because we have calendared scheduled times to do updates on those pieces throughout the year with the full board. And that's how we'll really be using the board focus items over the course of the year. So that led me to really be focused more broadly on, in this context, and I think we've talked about this need, and is aligned to kind of the fourth objective of just kind of, shoring up foundations, broadly speaking, in terms of kind of like that fourth objective is around like systems, organizational coherence. That's where, some of our work around standard operating procedures and so forth lives. But I think in the policy realm, it's like kind of tackling, where do we need to ensure we're doing the annual required work for one, right? That there's annual required review of certain things, and where we may be, obviously the legislative updates, as we've talked about, that was on our radar, but, the places where we might be just way overdue in updating some policy and bringing it into alignment. So I've gone through kind of a process of analysis here to try and kind of get us to a recommendation. So if we could, I'll maybe pause for a second and see if there's any clarifying questions first. But then what I'd propose is, I added it again as a PDF, and I know most people have hard copies. Some people were away of kind of the policy master tracker, but I've added some data to it that I think was helpful. So I'll step us through kind of what I did and what you have access to. That's what's in board docs is the most recent updated version to kind of talk through the process and then present kind of the proposal of kind of our work plan, which is the other attachments that's in board docs, in addition to just those two background pieces. I just kept those in board docs. Some of that information's been incorporated here. So that's what I'd propose how we kind of proceed. But before we jump into that, let me just pause to see if there are initial questions. So, Julian.
So just to understand what we're going to be doing this meeting and moving on through all the meetings is essentially going through systematically this page that you put on the PDF and deciding what we will cover when, and that's a piece of it. We are no longer going to do the curriculum half of the thing. So it's going to be strictly a policy meeting. Is that?
Primarily, I would say yes. There are some of these plans, like the LAU plan is still a piece that will come up, as you'll see, I think, in incorporating what are the policy updates and the relevant plans. So I've tried to align them into kind of coherent groupings so that we're which might become clear as I kind of show it. But a lot of the curriculum updates will come through the full board, right, through the board focus items.
Okay, so when we're on those board focus items, we will be in a position to ask lots of questions like we would in a committee meeting. So that's my only concern is it's fine. It's good. I think a broader view of everything and have everybody into it is excellent. My concern is, sometimes in the interest of time, we say, well, that's enough, I can go talk to all these people anytime, but this is the opportunity for most of the board. But so that's my question. So we're essentially going to systematically go through all of these and do so every year.
Right. And I mean, some of it I think might be more space, but I think there's this recognition that we have a few bodies of work that it'll be good to get to. And I think part of the challenge, even as we talked about it in the prior work plan, was, even within, primarily within the committee structure, there's only limited time, right? We're historically carrying the work of two committees, right? And we're not the only committee for whom that's true, right? So there's necessarily like a little bit of a trade-off. And I think kind of the strategy is many of the kind of curriculum or just kind of priority-oriented topics were of interest to the full board, right? Those updates like the high school design updates, ESOL resolution, things like that. So it made sense to provide visibility there, and that opens up space for us to potentially get more accomplished on the policy and kind of annual plan front. But we can see, what we're proposing. Hopefully this will resonate in terms of areas of interest and aligned topics. I think it may, but that's what I'll look forward to feedback on. Sarah?
Yeah, just to add, because Julian, I think that's a great question. And I think that the intention, around the curriculum pieces, right, we have all these, the three curriculums already moving. And so I anticipate there just to be more updates about implementation of those curriculums and less conversation. But by no means does that mean that there isn't space to ask questions and get more information about those curriculum, which is, the new process of giving questions before the board meetings and having time at the board meetings to ask the questions. So I don't see it as curriculum disappearing from this committee. I see it as it just being deprioritized within this committee, but staying at the same level at the board level.
Well, in the long run, I would suggest that we reevaluate the committee organization, because since curriculum is whether it's the SEL curriculum or the math curriculum, all of those particular curricula are the essence of what is impacting the students, and so I think as you are organizing in the next couple months, that should be something that should be very seriously considered, because I don't want us to get away from it. And I'm not saying that being on not having the whole board. I think the whole board needs to know everything, but to make sure that there is how is it going? Where are the issues? Those kinds of questions, I think, are something that the committee, a committee should take up. So that's my 2 cents for that.
No, and that is definitely on the radar within the leadership to look at the committees. And, just like right now with this committee, I look at this emphasis on policy as a this year plan while we look at the overall organization of the committees and figure out what is best moving forward.
Mickey, do you have a question or comment? I think you're muted, Mickey.
Thank you. Yes, I have a comment. I think maybe something we can think about it is that, the way we have all the policies areas here well organized, so we know exactly with the acronyms and then the right policy. And I know then we're moving the curriculum to a more general approach to the whole board. Can we have something also related to the curriculum? Because, we've been in the curriculum committee for years, but I think some of the curriculum areas and plan, if we can have something like that, a document, then we can share with the whole board. So we can follow the curriculum too, because sometimes I know the staff used to prioritize what kind of, topic or the curriculum area need to be presented to the whole board. And I think if we have some of those documents, like we have the policy, we can also come to prioritize. I know we have the core instruction. So under the core instruction, what we have, like Juliana just mentioned, curriculum, we have the study of the Wabanaki study and Africana studies. And then we have the law plan. And then we have also something that we want to see, the high school. So it's a lot of going on around the curriculum, then we don't want to lose length of that. So I think something then we can have a shareable document, so we can, okay, that one is done, or maybe we feel like, okay, we need to get more workshop or feedback, get more input on that specific curriculum, so we can pick up in that document. I don't know if something then is doable. What do you think, Aaron?
Yeah, I think yes. Well, I'm thinking of a couple documents that I think, that we have in existence that we could share to see if that kind of meets the need. And I think again, I think the question, and I know this was always kind of a conversation of exactly kind of what's the board's role as it relates to curriculum, right? And so, trying to prioritize. I mean, I think some of the things you'll see named are things that are on this group's agenda still, specifically the high school and the LAU plan, right? Because those are kind of annual required plans that the board has responsibility for either approving or providing input to and that kind of thing. So that was part of trying to prioritize this. But yes, I think as a starting point to kind of clarify if this is the right kind of tool to help board members monitor it, of just kind of the layout of minimally by grade, span, and content area, what curricula are being used. And then, for some of our, some of our other student populations, right, in terms of for ELD, we use a curriculum called time zones for our level 1s and level 2s and things like that to make it visible about where they are and where we're at in implementation of those things. Because that's how I'm hearing you, of just like that, table of some,
right.
Yeah, would be a useful starting point. So, I think we have some things that we could pull together, if not by the end of this week, by the end of next week, to share.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, well, what I'm going to do is share my screen to just show that policy master tracking sheet, just to show a little bit of what the data was that I added, so that you understand in the the PDF, and I'll add an updated electronic version for the board update this week. So everybody has like a Excel version of it, so you can kind of play with it as you like. But let me kind of show you what I did. I essentially, much of what I did was, can you guys see the document now? Yeah, okay. A lot of what I did was incorporated information from that other sheet from Drummond about what's required, what's recommended, when was their last update, just to use that to analyze the status of our policy book and where we stand. So what you'll see is I added this column A. Is it a required policy? So that in that sheet was like bolded. So just so we're tracking that. Is there kind of a required plan associated with it? So, for example, we're required to have plans. Not all of them are required to be updated annually. Like some of them are just required to exist. But I feel like some of these I've never seen. So it'd be good in this go around to kind of bring forward and be like, do we have one? What does it look like? Right. So, for example, we're required to have an affirmative action plan. Right. So that's why I kind of tagged that with, and some of the policies speak to it directly, others don't. So, for example, now there's the comprehensive emergency management plan. We have a policy and there's an expectation of an annual plan that's approved annually by the board. So, so I added that column. There aren't a lot of those. The LAO plan is another example, as we've talked about. And so I've just kind of flagged that here where there's an associated required plan. Then there's things like chemical hazards and pest management and things like this. But kept the dates of when it was initially adopted, last updated or reviewed. And then I incorporated the dates of like when Drummond or MSMA produced kind of their most recent updated like model policy, just as somewhat of a benchmark of like, is there an updated policy for us to kind of look to as a starting point that, has been produced later than when we last reviewed the policy. So just a bit of an indicator of like, is our policy out of date or not, right? Was using that as a bit of a criteria to help establish that. So that's what's in column I. So for example, we last updated the affirmative action policy in 2019. But Drummond or MSMA have produced a kind of model policy, an updated model policy in 2021. So that's an area where there's probably something in there that either from legislation or somewhere, that we should look, at least be curious about whether we should incorporate into our policy. So that's how I kind of flag these. So different, and I know we've done this intentionally on some like ACAA. Their last model update was in 2020 because that was when the updated Title IX regulations came out. We knew that was incorporated into our work. So, we're kind of covered, right, in terms of like our policy reflects the most recent guidance on that front. So anyway, I went down through and did that across all of the different policies here. Are there any questions about what's here, the data that I had? Yep. Mickey?
Yes, and I just want to understand the process about out of date. Just to understand, do we have a specific length then the policy need to be reviewed or updated? We just figure out it has been long and the same. Then that specific.
I was only using if there was a model policy produced since we last updated the policy. That's all that.
Yes, I understand.
Yeah.
Yes, I really understand that side. So if we have if we don't have a model like I saw some of the model 2021, then we just really think about how can we update what we have already update like a couple years ago. So for the one we don't have any model, do we have a length? Then we know that, okay, this is the time to review that specific one, because I see some of them, it has been since 2015, or some of them couple years really back. So just to understand the process right now.
Yeah, I didn't have, as far as I know, right, I mean, typically they produce them when there are legislative updates or other things, that there isn't something, in my understanding that would suggest is existing legislation or otherwise that would, require us to update it. We may choose to prioritize looking at one of those policies, but there's not something out there that is a more recent model that we would be looking to kind of incorporate into ours. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, I will follow it closely. Thank you.
Julianne?
Yeah, my question is, with these updates from Drummond Woodson, do we have copies of those as yet? Or I don't, when I was putting together my book, I didn't notice
No.
anything. Okay, so we actually need to have copies of those that are marked X, I guess.
Well, yeah. And I mean, as I propose, as we work through it, right, that'll be part of our process here, right? Just in terms of kind of doing it in a manageable way. But yeah, either from Drummond or MSMA, I have access to the MSMA model policy library. So
I think we do. We should too, I think.
yeah. Sarah?
Yeah, just one quick question. Is column D the annual policies, the ones that have to be done annually?
No, it's just if there is a required plan associated with it. It doesn't necessarily require annual updates. Yeah.
Okay. And could we have a column for those that have to be updated annually?
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I could reflect that. I mean, I went back and forth. At one point, I wrote in the name of the plan, and then it was like kind of repetitive from the name of the policy. Typically, I was like, but anyway, yes, I could figure out a notation so we know and are able to track that. Nylet?
Thank you. Yeah. So I'm wondering, are these all the policies that we have to update for the whole year, or is this just all that we have to update in general, or like that all that the Drummond and Drummond found as like a space, like policies that generally need to get updated, whether it's this year, next year, or however?
Excellent question, Nylet. That's a good segue, probably. I mean, this is what's listed here are all the existing policies on our policy book. And so this is kind of more the latter of what you said, of like an analysis just based on kind of that Drummond information about whether we have ones that are up to date or not up to date, whether there's existing. So I think the next part of the conversation is for us to prioritize which kind of groups of policies would we want to dig into to update this year. I don't think it's possible for us to update all of the out-of-date policies this year. There's too many of them, and some of them don't feel urgent, I would say. But I think that's the point of the next part of the conversation is like, okay, what do we want to tackle this year? So I have a proposal for that, kind of trying to analyze it, which is kind of where I'll go next if there are any more questions just about this tracker sheet and the data that's there. Nyla, did that answer your question?
Yeah, that did. Thank you, Aaron.
Yep. Okay, so I was doing things like filtering, like, okay, which are the ones, just to look at it, of like, okay, these are all the out-of-date ones. So I was trying to think about that, the plans and our priorities, to determine what might be, what we might want to prioritize to kind of work through this year. So I'm going to see, does this just allow me to switch? Yeah, can you now see this updated? This other sheet that's in there, the kind of policy committee work plan. Again, you have a PDF, access to the PDF of this and board docs. So I'm going to start here and then go back up to the proposed calendar. So I felt like I needed some way to organize this. And so was starting to kind of bundle things that were like together potentially in terms of groups of policies to bring forward for us to kind of review and look at. And if there was an annual plan to kind of, so it was like a coherent topic as opposed to just a set of disparate policies for us to be looking at. So, and aligned to kind of some of our interests and priorities. So it balances, kind of all of that. So this is what I identified, these kind of areas of topics. So this first one as kind of people equity. So, if we are kind of calendaring that for one of our committee meetings, we'd look at what exists in terms of our affirmative action plan, and review the current drafts of these three policies, because these ones all are required to be up, or not required, but are out of date per that prior analysis. So we would look to kind of update these policies, review the plan, in a session, and that's all kind of around some of this people equity, as I called it, right? Affirmative action, harassment, sexual harassment stuff. There was another group of policies that were out of date, board-related policies. So these ones flagged by that, there have been Drummond models produced. And so ones potentially that we may want to consider revisiting. I don't know, necessarily that these are huge priorities, but ones that fell in the out of date. There were a few on the facilities list that had both plans and were out of date. So there was a couple there, the school pest management and comprehensive emergency management. There was a group of things related to high school. So we're required to have a dropout prevention plan and a dropout prevention committee. And then there were a few, not all of these are necessarily out of date, but it felt like it might make sense to look at these together in a kind of coordinated look, right? So that there was kind of consistency and alignment across our policies. So pulled those out, and certainly our high school work would be relevant within this. There were a few were required to have kind of teacher and leader evaluation plans. That's not an annual one. They were just required to have them back from kind of 2012 era. These two, the recruiting and hiring ones, are nominally out of date. There's updated model policies, but it felt like it made sense as we were looking at the plan to look, at all of these. Some of these policies are not super deep or substantive, right? Like the educator and administrator evaluations mainly say you need to have a plan, right? But anyway, so hiring and evaluation was a group. There's a group of policies related to special ed that needed some update, that felt like a relevant kind of topic area for us to kind of dig into. Handful around computer use that were out of date. There's a group I just called legislative and other. So these were the two that came out of the most recent legislative session, the truancy and the restraint and seclusion policy, for which there was, legislation in the last session that now has kind of updates for us to incorporate. Suicide prevention is not a plan. It's not a required one, but we're supposed to have some protocols in place, which we do. So it felt like, I don't know, I grouped those together. That's a little bit of the other column. And then we have our multilingual, kind of policies and plans related to serving our multilingual learners. So the major chunk of that is the LAU plan. And then there were two policies related to that. They weren't necessarily out of date, but it felt like that, is has been a priority item for us. Would be good to think about our policies in relationship to the LAU plan, just to see if there was, any relevant updating. And then these are on the miscellaneous list. These are the remaining ones that are just out of date by that assessment. So you can see a wide range of policies. And might be various perspectives on the prioritization of them. I guess in my mind, in a day-to-day administration of things, these are not ones that are problematic for us or we're overdue for updates. I reference the student education records and information one, frequently, but I don't feel like we're out of date or whatever, So that was kind of a list of just miscellaneous ones that are out of date for us to consider. So this is where I'll kind of go back to the top. And again, this is on the PDF that you have of a potential proposal. And kind of the thinking is, for any of these topics, we would prepare and share, drafts of the policies and or plan, in advance of the meeting, so that in the meeting we could work through, the model policies and proposed changes, with the goal of then bringing it the next month. So things that we did, reviewed in November, the goal would be, and obviously once we got into it, if we weren't ready to advance something, we'd grapple with that at the time. But an ideal cadence would be we're able to review these, right, and then bring them forward for the first board meeting of the month to kind of have first read and workshop. And then at the second reading or second board meeting of the month, we would do kind of vote, second reading and vote. So ideally we would, in 1 month, kind of do some review and feedback here in the committee. And then in the following month, go through the 2 board kind of readings. So, so this is, kind of thinking from that space. So my proposal, just based on, kind of a variety of things, including kind of the timelines of other work that are happening, both in terms of priority work, statutory timelines. This is what I was kind of proposing of these policy areas. I should, call that, from those that kind of we determined down below. So it felt like it would be good to kind of do, as the first one, kind of get the legislative update ones as kind of our first pass, get that done in November, recognize we're transitioning, kind of board membership and committee membership potentially as we go into December. So let's get those 2 done. That would be the truancy and restraint and seclusion one. And then talking a little bit about, or building awareness of kind of what our suicide prevention kind of protocols are. But then in December, reviewing the hiring and evaluation ones in advance of, hiring season, and kind of making our way through our performance evaluations for administrators and teachers. So we need to do some calendaring. December is currently scheduled for December 26th. So we do need to do some calendaring at the end. January, doing the people equity ones. Those have been ones that we've wanted to get to for some time. So prioritize those there. February, focusing on the LOUD plan and the 2 multilingual, kind of English learner policies. Following that in March. So here kind of digging into, some of our special populations and, kind of the policy and other work are associated with that. So doing special ed, finalizing anything in April related to the facilities ones. And here, I mean, open to a lot of feedback about how particularly the latter part of this goes. Was potentially the board ones, to get those current. The computer use ones, getting those done in advance of kind of the new school year. So we have those updated. I mean, potentially we could switch those so that we could approve them by June. So that might be a good modification here. And then I put high school more strategically in August, to come back to that set of policies and the dropout prevention plan. Again, we will have regular updates 3 times during the year about the status of the high school design work, at the full board. So I don't want this to communicate that we're not going to be talking about that work. But it felt like in thinking about our policy updates and some of the dropout prevention work, it'll be good for that work to have taken those next steps, right? To inform, it felt like reviewing the policies in advance of having that work develop more fully might end up in the place where we end up with some misalignment. It felt like it made sense to do a little more work in this design year in terms of how we're thinking about high school to ensure that then the policies are kind of supportive of that vision versus trying to initiate it from a policy place without having set that or done the additional work we have kind of scoped for this year. So I felt, and then miscellaneous is just kind of on here, when or how we might want to take those up, and maybe we don't, that could come off entirely. So I felt most kind of firm, just from my perspective, in terms of rationale of these first few. So I'm open to I'm open to any feedback, of course, right? But from an intentionality standpoint, I was thinking mostly about these first set of meetings and then kind of locating the high school work once we've had to kind of complete this year's work around the design stuff, just solely in terms of what it might mean for implications of policy updates. I think the facilities board computer use could get moved around in whatever way. Or if there are folks who want to kind of advocate for prioritizing some of the policies that I didn't necessarily pull forward, open to that as well. So anyway, that's what I'm proposing, and let's just kind of open it up for discussion to see if we can kind of land on this in terms of kind of the work plan as we move forward through the remainder of the year and even into next year. So, Nyla, do you have your hand up again, or was that from before?
That's from before. Sorry.
No worries. No worries. Julianne? You're muted.
I just make that sure so I don't say something the wrong time. It looks fine. The setup looks fine. And my question is this the best order to consider things that might impact the budget? The reason I just asked about facilities as being one of those things that might, going over and saying something, and because I think my other part of my comment question is we can review the policy if they're updated. Where will they ever be evaluated for implementation? Is that our role? Every so often somebody asks, I know Emily will ask how's the implementation of the suspension policy going? And, and so I'm not saying, just as saying when we go through the list, some of it's just that it's there if we need it kind of policy that I understand, but if we've had any issues with any of these policies, it would be great to know whether we haven't been implementing them or whether we've been implementing them and had some difficulties with it. So just to kind of, I'll be quite frank, because otherwise I feel like this is something I can sit down in 2 afternoons and do, and get it done. I think discussions about all of it, but what I'm saying is, a lot of it's going to be, I think, possibly, dotting I's and crossing T's.
Well, I think
important. But
I guess I would, or my understanding of kind of the response there would be, and I think it's formally written into my job description, the executive director's principles is around implementing policy, right? Required to kind of implement policy. And so the board role is around setting policy. So just to answer one part of that question of kind of what are the roles, right? I think in terms of evaluating it, that really, I think, comes through with more of the body of work around what are the goals that we have and reporting out on kind of the performance monitoring around, the strategies and the goals that we have related to school culture, right? And, are we seeing progress on that front, right? And, I think there are questions that may emerge at that time around how the policies are supporting that. But I think the real role of the board is kind of setting the expectation for the superintendent and us, right? To kind of identify those goals and be making kind of the progress towards them. And that, we're working within this kind of policy context to do so. So there isn't that's how I would think about kind of evaluation more so. If there are issues, we can dive into those in individual, but I think from a comprehensive standpoint, the focus is really on, kind of what are the goals, the outcomes we're trying to achieve, right? And how we're making progress towards those.
I guess that's my question. How do we know if we're making progress?
Yeah, well, that's what we have. That'll be part of this monitoring cadence that we'll be doing throughout the year. So there'll be, in terms of the key results that we've talked about, we've identified key results related to each of the objectives. And so at the board calendar.
The strategic plan piece that, or priority piece, or...
Yes, and
I'm not saying this committee has to do it. I'm just wondering who's going to say, "Hey, we're doing pretty well as far as equity," or "Hey, we're doing, we've got to look at our pest management policy stuff," because it's we all of a sudden we have chipmunks all over the house or something, all over the building. So, it's just that you're right. The role is to set policy. And I guess the question is, do we set policy? How do we know that we've set policy that makes any difference, that's of any importance to anybody? Mm-hmm. So you don't have to do it today, but I would love to see a plan on how we can know that, we've updated this is what it should be doing, and we want to make sure that the effect of this policy is being realized. Okay, so maybe it's not this committee, but I'd like to know where it's happening and how it's being checked off. That's, if it's your job, and you can just say, hey, we're doing pretty well here, kind of stuff, or you can say occasionally, this is an issue. Doesn't have to. This isn't a full board meeting thing. I would think maybe it is if the policy is the issue is a big one, but it's something that I'm like one of the students is saying, why do we have to do this? Okay, if you remember saying that in school, why do we have to do this? It doesn't make any difference, kind of thing. I'll be quiet. I'll put my mute on.
Just, to kind of clarify, there's both for this year related to the objectives, there are kind of measures and metrics that we have talked about that we'll be presenting on in those board focus sessions to kind of talk about progress towards the goals we've established. And then the strategic planning work, as that unfolds and clarifies really that second phase, or the kind of third phase of it in the spring, around just the plan, is really clarifying those measures over time so that it's super clear for all, right? And particularly for you all at the board, but throughout the organization and community, of what measures we're tracking and how we'll be monitoring progress towards those. I recognize that's a little bit of a different, it's related, but also different to evaluating how any one of these individual policies may or may not be being effective. But I think some of that's going to come up just naturally in the conversation as we look to review these, right? To have kind of dialogue, and whether you all have heard stuff, I'll certainly be bringing forward, kind of the internal perspective of how these policies are working or not, or what's maybe valuable about kind of updating them, or where it is just no, we're out of date and out of compliance and we need to just update it, because that's also, that is a function for us. So, Mickey?
Yeah, I just want to emphasize something Julian just mentioned. It's something I've been all the time struggle for years, is that are we measure and building some metrics on some of those policies, or are we just updating policies for the reason just to update, but we don't have a process to measure? And I understood what you mentioned about, our strategic plan. So that means we're going to have some policy alignment with the strategic plan, which builds the evaluation and the process of building metrics to measure if the strategy aligning with the policies is building some impact or outcomes for a length of time. I don't know if you really understand my question, where I was coming from, or I can rephrase it.
Sure. You were breaking up just a little bit in there. So maybe just, I think I get what you're saying, but why don't you rephrase it real quickly, just so I'm...
Yes. Okay. So I mean, we are building some strategic plan with the superintendent plan, and then we're going to go with the steering committees. So now some of those plans have some policies attached on that, where we have to align those strategies with some of those policies. So I mean, that's the time we can build some process to evaluate also strategies and policy, and to see if those strategies really are working and impacting the student or staff, whatever reason is going to be those strategies. But I mean, that's going to be on the same time policies and strategies together. So we're building metrics to measure the success of those implementation.
Yeah. Yes, I believe that makes sense. I think, as we clarify kind of the core strategies in the strategic plan, I think that will help us identify policies to prioritize to kind of evaluate in the coming year. I think I also want to just recognize some of the limitation of that so much is held, policy only holds like a limited amount in there, and so,
Exactly.
I mean, we need to, strategy and curriculum, like it doesn't, get into most of the depth, right? But I do think there will, I can imagine there would be a set of, in landing the strategic plan, there might be a set of policies that we would want to prioritize for review, like next year, to ensure they are aligned to, the strategies articulated or are supportive of the strategies articulated in the strategic plan. But like there is just one whole policy about having a comprehensive educational plan, like that's a policy of itself, right? And it essentially says you need to have one with goals and objectives and so forth, right? So it's not like a substantive policy, I would say, right? The substance is in the product that gets established, which is the core of our collective work together. And that many of these policies just help to articulate how the organization should function, right? And as we review them, we should consider, what are challenges or issues there might have been with them. But, I mean, this is going to be the most, it's like, well, I don't know. I mean, they're all relevant, could be relevant in different ways, but just like the board policy of employment of relatives, right? It'd be good to ensure we have it updated, right? And we have clarity around that. But, I don't think we need a deep evaluation around that. And I don't think anybody's proposing that kind of thing. So I do think what I'm hearing from you, Mickey, is I do think there will be a place as the strategic plan gets defined, that there may be additional policies to kind of identify and prioritize to make sure they're aligned to or supportive of creating the conditions for whatever the right kind of frame will be for implementation of those strategies.
Yes, indeed.
Sarah?
Yeah, just a quick clarifying around some of the phrases that we're using for anybody that watches this at home, because I think we're talking about strategic plans, objectives, and kind of like all these things. So we have a plan for this academic year that is objectives that has been rolled out to the board. Those things we're going to be getting regular updates on, that we will be able to have metrics of success or not success, but we're going to be able to see the progress on those things. I think in seeing those results, it might inform the policy work that we have to look at, right? Because those are the priorities that have been set for this year. And then the strategic plan is going to be worked on over the course of this year. So it's not anything that we're going to start to see the results of anytime in this academic year. So I just want to make sure that we're using the same words. So when we're talking about this academic year, those are the objectives that Superintendent Scallon has set forward, that the board had input in and is aligned with.
Could I just make a couple quick comments, Erin? One is I just wanted to, when you had the list of kind of things that, I think you had down the bottom had just like a number of different, I don't know what was highlighted there, but evaluation of the superintendent was one. I just had a question with Chair Lentz being here, because I know that's I just wasn't sure here versus in other avenues that one is being looked at. So I don't know if I'm missing anything with that piece.
So it did actually come up yesterday in finance and operations. So the finance and operations looks at the actual evaluation that is being used, and then this committee looks at the policy that kind of surrounds it, the thinking. There was something that came up within that conversation, though, which is kind of within the superintendent evaluation, there isn't language right now, either in the policy or the evaluation itself, around operationalizing and making sure that these policies are updated on an annual basis, the ones that have to legally be done. And so it doesn't, again, this is not urgent, but I think within the next year, if we could do CBI, I think that would be helpful to kind of operationalize, gosh forbid we all disappear one day. How do we create a system that this kind of tracking and, progress documentation is happening, so that we're making sure that we're staying in compliance with regulations at the state level?
Thank you.
for
So that
flagging
was kind of my thinking, is just, can that be sometime in the coming year, on the agenda? So not as like but just that it wasn't on our this year, just maybe to consider moving forward how folks want to prioritize that, but just that it gets to be somewhere on the list in the coming year would be my vote. And then my other question, Erin, was just about next month, since that's the last meeting. So this is partly selfishly wanting to know for next month. You had said, so legislative, but then you mentioned the piece about suicide prevention. Am I remembering that right? Mm-hmm. So is that something that there's staff work going into that before next meeting? Like, is that something that's been?
It's sharing out. We've had staff, we've had our social work team has worked on a bunch of things over the years, and we have protocol that informs our annual trainings that we do. So it's just bringing visibility to that work.
Okay. So it's not like a huge update about that, but it's work that's been ongoing for social work staff. Okay. I just wasn't sure if there was something specific in that.
It was just on the list of kind of required plans, and that one's technically not required, it's recommended. We obviously believe in having one, right? Since there's been the kind of ongoing work, it felt like, it'd be good to bring visibility just so there was awareness, right, about, how we talk about that, how we're prepared to, or how we work to kind of prevent that, what are some of the supports in place, those kinds of things.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else have questions, or
sorry.
We got everybody mostly? Okay, thanks.
So we could consider moving, one potential just on this feedback, or just on that last point, we could, try and include the evaluation. We have hiring and evaluation, right? And so maybe it makes sense to kind of to also potentially include the, CBI, the evaluation of the superintendent, with that group of policies. That's kind of like an aligned group of things that we're talking about. So, I do think these are, going to be, it's going to change the way any of this, not just that change. So I could make that update, that we can move that up into that batch, when we're kind of looking at hiring and evaluation. I think the other potential change that I'd like to make, as I was talking it through, is moving the computer use ones up a little bit so that those are done and approved before the end of the year. So they're in place for the coming year. So that would mean we'd need to look at them in committee. So I'd propose, if people are comfortable with it, flopping the board and the computer use policies, if that's all right. So I'll move CBI to the evaluation. Where did I go past it? Here we go. Okay. But I was just going to make the comment that, it's going to require, and we're getting organized internally, right? But I think for us, for a committee, right, that to have the materials well in advance so that you have opportunity to review, right? So that we can come into the meetings ready to kind of move through them, because these are, there's a number of policies. So we'll see how we do. This is an ambitious list, I think is the potential challenge for us. But I think, trying to frame this year of trying to get a number of these things kind of caught up, and kind of shore up our policy and kind of plan foundation, kind of aligned to that fourth objective of, kind of shoring up our foundations in terms of our core operating business, is kind of how we're thinking about it. So, we'll see. There is a little bit of wiggle room in some of these timelines. And, certainly I think we would agree some that are, have higher priority than others, the hiring eval people, multilingual and special ed work in particular are ones that I think are, not that the other ones aren't important to do also, but from a strategic sense, those feel like the most important kind of batches. So part of why prioritizing those first, just in case it takes us a little longer. But I think what I'd like to kind of propose is, that I'll be accountable for ensuring we have the materials well in advance for committee members to review it so that we can try and move through it relatively quickly, work through kind of the track changes and, from the model policy, just to try and keep, try and make a bunch of progress this year and shoring this up. So. Julie?
Thanks. Could you ask whoever is going to actually do the suggested revisions, have it to us at least a week before, if not earlier, just get it done shortly after this meeting, so that we're always a few weeks ahead, because, different people have different schedules of when they can look at things. And I did all this stuff today. So it helps to have a little bit of process time.
Absolutely. Yep.
Thanks.
Okay. Well, I think if people are comfortable with this as as always, right, we can amend our plan as we move forward, but, we are getting organized to, that last point, to start kind of producing these draft, kind of updates and so forth and get into that cadence. We'll get started on that so we can get them, well in advance. I think the last kind of item I think for tonight would be to discuss for a brief moment, and I don't know, well, we could either do this here or offline, but we need to amend December and April dates, I believe. Our conflicts, they're either during, December is currently December 26th, and I think the April date has a conflict as well. I'm going to stop sharing this for now just so we can see each other. So, I don't know how much the committee membership will change, after the elections and that kind of thing. So I don't know if it makes more sense, to do this offline versus trying to calendar together. But, Aura, you don't have a, whatever the right expression is there. You're good with anything.
I am. What do you think, Sarah? I'd ask.
Yeah, I think
on the schedule.
It'll save some emails for folks. I think if we have time, let's do it. I anticipate this committee staying the same with the remaining people and adding someone to it. So I think it's worth the investment now if we can plug it out.
Great. So let me. So let's look at December. So we have board meetings on the 5th and the 19th. Just to throw some things out there. And I mean, the week of the 18th is, we typically are fourth Tuesday. That's why the 26th doesn't work. The week of the 18th, I see we have the state of the schools. I don't think we'll need 3 hours, but the state of the schools at City Council, and then board meeting on Tuesday, the 19th. So, I could add something on Wednesday, the 20th, but that's a busy week. So that's an option. Or we could look to the week of December 11th, moving it up that far. I guess
that's what I was thinking. Looking at the calendar, there's on the 11th is the Finance Committee meeting, as it's scheduled right now, and so maybe the 12th is the Tuesday. I don't know if that's too soon for your people to pull things together.
No, I think we can get there on that in terms of prep. I can't do that Tuesday. We're holding multilingual high school info night as part of the high school process on that night, but I could do Wednesday the 13th if that was possible.
Right now, for me.
Mickey Nylet.
Can you say that date again, Aaron?
Wednesday, December 13th.
I'll be in Australia from December 8th to January 18th. I can probably try to make it online, but I'll email before then if it's like an impossible time based on I won't know what time it'll be then until I get there. So
yes, I can't imagine.
Just send us pictures.
I have a conflict. At what time?
I mean, I'm flexible. I mean, we've been 5:30 to 7, but I could move earlier if that's helpful. Or I'm flexible.
Yeah, for that time, I'm gonna be available just after 6. I mean, 6, I'm open, but not before that. I've been already booked.
Mhm.
At six,
Yeah.
6:30 is fine with me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. So I'll make
When-
these. Let me make this change over here. So December 6. Would 6 o'clock work for you, Mickey, or is 6:30 better, just in terms of your timing?
Yeah, 6, but yeah, 6:30 is much better, so I have a time to switch.
Okay. So December 13th, 6:30 p.m. And then if we can look all the way ahead to April. So we have board meetings. I mean, kind of wrapping up budget. I guess the question would be, would people be open, available to do it on Tuesday, the 30th? It's scheduled for the 23rd at the moment, which is during spring vacation week. So just pushing it out a week, since there are 5 Tuesdays in that month, and do it on Tuesday, April 30th.
I'm okay.
I'm almost there. I'm just trying to get the other one in before I forgot. Probably. I mean, at this point, if
Right.
I'm away or something, I have a trip around the world planned or something like that, I'll let you know.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Okay. So we'll stick with kind of this existing time, 5:30 to 7 and we'll move it back a week outside of the vacation week. Okay.
Okay.
Oh,
So we'll coordinate invites, calendar invites. I'll have Kate send
Okay.
all that stuff out for you all.
All right. Because I won't remember.
was that it, Aaron? Just those two you needed to figure out?
Yeah, no, I think we're good for the other dates. February break doesn't conflict for us. It conflicts at board, but so yeah, those are the only two where there were kind of holidays or vacation conflicts.
Okay. So we'll adjourn unless anybody has anything else in just a minute. I just wanted to ask, Aaron, do you think for the meeting, so our next meeting is Tuesday, November 28th. Would you mind if it was just even a couple minutes, if there was a space for me just to maybe reflect a little bit about, the committee's work last few, maybe just the last year, but maybe just like a few minutes. That would be nice to, just have a chance to reflect on that a little bit in the meeting. But I know I want to be able to do everything on the agenda, so just be a short. Okay.
Sure. Yep. Of course.
Great. All right. Thanks, everybody. So it looks like we'll be adjourning 6:40 and we'll meet on November 28th. Nice to see
Good
everybody.
night, all.
All
Good
right.
night.
Good night. Thank you.